Dr. Craig, is intelligent design just a God of the gaps argument? And having God of the gaps arguments been shown to be problematic?
I've addressed that already tonight, Brad. It is not a God of the gaps argument. Now, for those who wonder what that is, God of the gaps argument is a form of argument that says, well, we can't explain this, therefore God must have done it. And that's obviously a very weak sort of argument. Rather, as ID theorists offer their argument, they first lay down criteria for detecting design. Criteria that, as I say, have a wide applicability in other fields. In crime scene investigations, for example, how can you tell the fire was a result of arson rather than natural causes? In intellectual property protection, how do you know a passage was plagiarized deliberately rather than merely produced independently with similar wording? In the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, how do you distinguish mere noise from outer space with a signal that exhibits an intelligent design behind it? So these criteria are developed by ID theorists with a view toward detecting design in a multiplicity of different fields, and they function well there. The question is, in the field of biology, do biological organisms exhibit these same criteria? So it's not at all an argument for God of the gaps. In fact, it's not really an argument for God at all, as I explained tonight. It's simply saying that there is a justifiable design inference here based on these criteria. To deny that, you've either got to attack the criteria, or you've got to show that biological organisms don't meet these criteria. But it's not a matter of God of the gaps or appeals to ignorance. That's failing to engage with these ID theorists in their theories of design inferences.
It's interesting that, like the person who asked the question, I heard the argument of the gaps several times about the origin of life, about the mutations to have resistance to malaria and others. So at least I heard that argument repeatedly. Let me add one personal thing. Again, you have to bear with me. You know, one of the reasons why I write in journals like Theology and Science, and Dr. Craig didn't read from the article that follows, the one that he read, which is by me, one of the reasons why I write in theological journals is because I have a PhD in theology. The first two books I wrote in my life were theology books. One was a commentary about the incarnate Verb in Spanish. The other one was a commentary about the early views in the Bible about human origins. That was in Latin. So I have a PhD in theology. I feel I can talk about theology whenever it seems convenient, although I feel much more comfortable, of course, speaking science, which is where I have been working now for many, many years.
Okay, well, here's a theology-related question. What do you think about mankind's ability to know God's intentions? And specifically, for example, how we seem to be assuming that God intended for evolutionary processes to occur to lead to some sort of end, like us. Do you think that we can know that God wanted that?
I frankly don't dare to think about that question. I just couldn't know how to think of what God's intentions were. But if I take a position which I like to take, which is from my point of view, I will argue, as I did before, that I can think myself as being a creature of God. There is a view of Christian providence that said, well, I was predicted by God in God's mind, and God has an infinite mind, which is perfectly reasonable. I'm quite willing to live with that, but I'm more interested perhaps in seeing myself as being a creature of God without trying to interpret too much what God's intentions are. I will go back to the problem of free will. God has given us free will. It has consequences, including crimes and misdemeanors and sorts of horrible things that are done by us. did God intend these things to happen? Well, it's good that we have free will. I think we are better than robots without free will. That's the price we pay. What the intentions of God are, or could have been, I do not know.
This is an enormous assumption that underlies the argument about design flaws that many people have pointed out. The person who perceives flaws in nature's designs and says, therefore, this could not have been made by an intelligent designer, any engineer could do a better job, is presuming to know God's intentions or the mind of the designer. I remember once talking with an electrical engineer at University of California, Davis, and he said to me, why, we engineers design suboptimal systems all the time. He says, we do it perhaps for cost effectiveness because it might be too expensive to put in the really good materials, or we do it to keep the size a certain dimension. It would cost too much to shrink it down, or there are just myriad reasons for why engineers will design systems that are suboptimal. And so when these critics of intelligent design look at things in nature and say, well, that nerve that runs so long around the thorax of this creature to its larynx, that could have gone a lot more directly, say that this is a flaw, they are presuming to know the mind of the designer and what he had in mind, and that no intelligent person could have done such a thing. That's just enormously presumptuous. I think that rather than focusing on the flaws, we ought to look at the organism as a whole, and we would see that it's a marvel of engineering, even if it exhibits sometimes certain features that may puzzle us.
Dr. Craig, there are a number of questions about your claim about dogs and cats feeling pain.
Yes.
So we'll have to ask about that. What's your proof that only hominids can be aware of pain? One person asked. Another person asked.
I'm not hearing you.
What's your proof that only hominids can be aware that they're in pain? There's one question.
Let me refer you to Michael Murray's book, Nature Read in Tooth and Claw, published by Oxford University Press. This was a real eye-opener for me because as a pet owner and an animal lover, I've been deeply troubled by the problem of animal pain. And what Murray points out is that apart from humanoid primates, animals do not have the prefrontal cortex of the brain, which is the portion of the brain associated with self-awareness. And I noticed in Dr. Ayala's contribution to theology and science, he agreed that humans are the only animals with self-awareness. Now, if that's true, that means that only human beings or humanoid primates can have the awareness that they are themselves in pain. Dogs and cats and horses can be in pain. They have the phenomena of pain. That would be level 2 on that hierarchy that I showed. But they wouldn't have the second-order awareness of being themselves in pain because they don't have self-awareness. And that's hugely significant when it comes to the problem of animal suffering, because it means that animals don't really suffer in the way that you and I do. When we have the awareness that I am in pain, they lack that. There is an analogy to this, however, in human experience that Murray goes into. There's such a thing called blind sight that biologists have found in certain persons, where a person cannot see. He's blind. He can't see anything. And yet, if you toss a ball to him, he'll catch it. And if he walks across the stage, he'll go around the podium. He won't run into it. In a sense, he has a first-order awareness of the things around him, but he doesn't have the second-order awareness of being aware of those things. And so that would be somewhat similar to this notion of having pain awareness, but not the awareness of being in pain. So look at Murray's book for just a fascinating discussion of this subject.
I want to go back for a moment to the issue of the engineer who has not designed an electrical system that is perfect. But if that engineer designs an electrical system that causes fires, we put him in jail. If somebody who has designed a human reproductive system that causes 20 million abortions per year, certainly I don't want them to be my God or any intelligent designer. I'm going to take perhaps a little extra time to come for once in complete agreement with Dr. Craig but by a different argument. I agree with you, the animals don't have self-awareness, which is what will make them aware they have sinned. If you have self-aware, you know exist as an individual, you are a subject of pain, you know you are going to die, because you see the other people around you, they die. So you are self-aware, you are death-aware. If there is death-awareness, there's ceremonial burial of the dead, because you want to be treated with respect when you die. The only creatures, the only animals that have ceremonial burial of the dead are humans. So humans they do that because we have death aware, and that's a necessary implication of self-awareness. So I think it's perfectly defensible that animals don't have self-awareness, and therefore they don't experience pain as a personal, as it were, attribute.